please.
Rick Perry, representing the Planning Commission.
Steve Sheffer, Board of Commissioners.
Mark Saunders, RBHA.
John Mayne, Fire Department.
Kent Swartz, Fire Department.
Carol Everhart, Rehoboth Dewey Chamber of Commerce.
Sharon Lynn, City Manager. Hopefully you all had a chance to review the minutes. And
Sharon, I told you I had an issue with the minutes, so they'll be available.
so the minutes are held up.
I'll send
No
them.
minutes. Hey, we take very, very precise minutes here, so, okay. Any correspondence, Margaret?
No correspondence, Sharon.
Okay. And we'll continue our discussion from our last meeting on August 16th. I did want to just inform the committee, if you were not aware, that at the Commissioners' Workshop meeting on September 9th, 2019, there was an update, as you know, that we discussed to give to the Board of Commissioners. We provided that recap of our meetings in the past, and then newly elected and seated Commissioner Susan Gay asked if there was a consensus to move forward with that, and it was stated by the mayor and Commissioner Schlosser that there was, and then Commissioner Gay recommended that the task force turn everything over to the Planning Commission. She said that on September 20th there would be a quorum of the Planning Commission on the task force, on this task force, and that wasn't necessarily the best way to move forward. But her point was, Commissioner Gay, was to have the Planning Commission do much of this research and combine with this group, this task force, to be able to bring an RFI forward as we've decided. So there was some discussion about that, and the mayor then said that it would be his recommendation to bring one or two more members from the Planning Commission into this group. So that was the consensus of the commissioners. So there's been some flux with the Planning Commission in meetings. They will have a meeting on October 11th. The framework of the Planning Commission is changing. There'll be 4 new members based on appointments, and of course Commissioner Gay, the vice chair of the Planning Commission, being elected as commissioner. So 4 new members. I recommend that we wait, and conferred with Mr. Perry, who presently is seated on the Planning Commission, that it would be preferable to wait to move forward with the RFI until those 1, 2, or 3 members of the Planning Commission are placed on this committee. Is that?
Yes,
is that
that's
your recommendation?
That's my recommendation as well.
I'm sorry, I wasn't here at the last meeting. Have we determined that we even need a parking garage? Because
Yeah, so we'll get into that.
All right.
So I think what was determined was that we should at least move forward with an RFI to have interested parties come back to us with their recommendation. So that's in the future. We can still discuss that if you so wish. But I wanted to get that on the table with the additional Planning Commission members. So do you have any questions about that? And I stand corrected, on the date of the meeting, September 9th, Commissioner Gay was not then seated, so she was speaking still as a member of the Planning Commission. But of course now she is.
I guess I have a 2-part question. Commissioner Gay's recommendation that it be turned over to the Planning Commission is based on having that be something in the comprehensive development plan because they're working at. Is that correct?
I think that was the basis of her recommendation, and that the Planning Commission has been working on that and will continue to work on the comprehensive development plan throughout the next year. We've requested a 1-year extension for that deadline. So that's my understanding, and that was her recommendation, that the Planning Commission should be if not turned over to a large part of this group to work with the task force to progress forward with any RFI or any further proceeding.
So what you're saying, what you then said was that the mayor's recommendation after that discussion was to place more members of the planning commission in this task force, not necessarily turn it over to the planning commission as Commissioner Gay suggested, but to put more folks from the planning commission on this task force to move forward. Is that correct?
Correct, correct.
I think that what is intended is simply that more members of the planning commission be involved in this task force working group, simply because we are in the midst of doing the CDP, and whether or not the city needs a parking garage is obviously something that's under consideration as part of that process.
So as we would do that, once I hear what you said, the planning commission is in flux, there's some new members, so we'll wait, see, and then they'll probably appoint some additional members on here. Then our job would be with those additional people and this existing task force to create the RFI.
Correct.
And then go out and get additional information, and then we're still at that point in no commitment mode. We're looking at recommendations from whoever's going to answer the RFI, and then see if we're still interested in doing this. So there's no decisions have been made.
Correct, with the caveat that, what was said in previous meetings, what I said, what I actually learned from at least one of the interested bidders, if you will, was that, it's difficult. Certainly they'll respond to an RFI, but the businesses spend a lot of time in developing these, and it's a very comprehensive development. So some may not be interested because they either hear or they see the minutes, or, we'll just tell them that we're still in the exploring stages, if you will. So this is very much as far as what I hear, an exploratory process. And I do want to bring up, the next agenda item, talk about the convention center parking, that might or may not relay any other information for you.
Well, that's great. And that being said, and that's why I wanted to kind of baby step walk through what you were saying and with this committee, because it seems like each time we meet, we kind of spend the first half of the meeting circling back around to the same things we keep saying. Do we really need this? Are we utilizing the parking that's already existing? Only one night a week, it's full back there. And we keep going around. This is walking through those steps. But I mean, I wanted you to say, and you did, that what we discussed last time, that an RFI probably isn't going to give us that detailed information that everybody's really looking for. I don't know, maybe it will. It'll get us a little bit more information. But these companies are not going to spend a whole bunch of money doing comprehensive studies on the need for this parking garage.
So let's with that said, I do want to move on to the next, because it relates very much to what you're saying. But any questions about the Planning Commission or where we are now? So that's understood. We'll wait for the new Planning Commission to be seated. And at that point, Mr. Perry can relay, or maybe those members would be already appointed, volunteers, and then they would come to, that would be my hope, that they would come to the next meeting. So there's a meeting on October 11th.
Yes, but the new appointees will not have been approved until at that time, so they won't be seated technically until after the Board of Commissioners takes their vote on the 18th.
Right. So then your November meeting would probably be when the new commission meets?
Well, we're expecting that we're going to have a bit of an organizational meeting hopefully before then.
Okay, so whenever that happens, it sounds like we should wait to hold our next meeting after the new members of the Planning Commission are seated.
I think that would, from the Planning Commission standpoint, that would be preferable, yes.
Okay, does that make sense?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. All right. So depending on when that meeting is, we probably can't set a meeting here, and we'll just circulate it internally here for a new date. Okay, thank you. And related to that, under new business, I did want to give you some statistics from the summer because we are into October 4th. Our parking season ended officially just about 2.5 weeks ago. And we have compiled all the parking statistics for revenue throughout the city, for the meters, for the permitted areas, and we have broken down the revenue from the convention center parking lot separately from all of the other city revenue collected for parking and for permits. And we have, just so to update you, we have 2 Parkeon pay stations installed back here in the convention center parking lot. Parkeon pay stations are the ones that we have up and down Rehoboth Avenue. So we initially purchased 97 of them, and then we added 2 more when the convention center parking lot was completed. And we have approximately 100 spaces there. It's a little less than that, but it's in the high 90 area. So we have approximately 100 spaces there. The revenue and the parking garage was first opened in 2000, parking lot was first opened in 2018 after the complex was complete. And the revenue for 2018 was $54,895. There was a issue and talk about signage. Nobody knew where it was, directional signage. So we increased that at the beginning of this season. Of course, there's more to come from that with the merge signage proposal that is on the commissioner's agenda for Monday. And the 2019 Convention Center parking lot was $68,434. So that's a difference, an increase of approximately $13,500.
So do you have any idea what an occupancy rate would be as an average? Is it 80% full, 70% full, 60% full? Do we have any idea what the potential, in other words, if we put it into dollars, what the potential would be if it was full 100%? I mean, if every space was
well, we
full
can
every
figure
day.
that out
It
for
was
the
just
entire-
interesting to know
Yeah.
how much we're using the existing
Sure.
lot.
Yeah, no, that's a
percentage-wise.
good statistic to have. So we can certainly, easily, I'll just,
But do the machines gather time of day, day of week statistical data for you?
there's some back office statistics that are available like that. And we can get you as much information as we can, but.
Yeah, it just might be interesting to see, knowing that, it's what Mark's asking for, but really, how often is it at 80%? How often is it at 10%? What day of week is it at 90%?
Right.
Things like that.
Well, yeah, we can get, it's a little cumbersome to gather that data, but we can do our best to get whatever.
And we
can.
correct, that is not subject to the 3-hour.
2
limit.
hours.
It's a 2-hour limit in the garage?
Yes, in
Okay, I didn't know that.
the parking lot, yes. And it runs from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. So visually, during the day, daytime hours, June, and unless there's an event at the convention center associated with parking, especially in June and the early part of September, and even maybe the last 2 weeks in August. Unless there's an event in the convention center, the parking lot is not utilized too much. The extreme eastern end of the parking lot is used more during the week. And just my visual observation and going out there and speaking to folks who I see parking there and then leaving, they said this is great. They can just walk down Baltimore Avenue and get to the beach. Few and far between, but that's been my investigation, if you will, and speaking to people and why they're parking
It would be
there.
interesting to know how the of course, we're getting at here, whether the 2 hours affects the total, if it was unlimited, if we would create more income than we do with just a 2-hour limit. And I guess there's no way of knowing other than,
No, there's no way of knowing. And then in the evening hours, you know, it's utilized for restaurant use. That's again what I've seen and what I've been listening to and speaking to people. You know, especially if they're, because, you know, generally, and I say this strongly in general terms, Rehoboth residents may not necessarily drive to that parking lot. Probably some do, but this is a walking town, we know that, and we know that if you're gonna, you know, go to a restaurant in Rehoboth Avenue or Lake Avenue or, you know, some of the other areas, many residents walk there. There are residents, of course, that do park there, but if the folks that I spoke to generally were not residents, so they came in from out of the city, they found that parking lot, and it was easy for them to park there because they knew their location and they knew they could go to a restaurant or shop or spend a couple of hours there. So,
Sharon, do you know what the reasoning behind the 2-hour limit was for the parking lot?
So it's actually a $2 an hour. It's not $3, and it's not 3 hours. So it is. You can park there.
Oh, all day.
I was mistaken with the 2-hour versus the $2.
Okay, all right.
So it is
Okay,
$2.
so it is,
I was
it's
thinking that
it's
too.
unlimited then?
Yes.
Oh, that makes all the difference in the world, yeah.
Can't go to the beach.
No, you can't go to the
No.
restaurant for 2 hours
Right.
either.
No.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Sharon, is it year round, or is it just when the other meters are in?
No, it's just in effect with the other meters. So $2, not $3, unlimited. Thank you. I went on for that for about 5 minutes. I had the two.
Carol and I were looking at each other, we're gonna have a discussion, right?
So, you know, that, of course, is a consideration of $68,000 for, I would assume, yeah, anyone, any entity responding to that. And of course, you know, factored into that equation with our first proposal was a share of the parking revenue. So any entity would have to decide whether or not that's even, you know, even worth it for them to tackle this endeavor.
Yep.
You're talking about if you're utilizing the convention center, also being able to rent the parking lot? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, or, you know, just looking at the numbers, is that beneficial? We know visually that it's not, you know, in the evening, and I wasn't here every night, but I was here many nights in July. There were a few weeks when it was, I won't say full, but it was utilized more often than May or June and the first couple of weeks in September. August it was not, and June it was not.
I'm really gonna assume that anyone we're gonna put an RFI is gonna come back and ask the questions. If you've got more utilization data, we need that. When is this thing full? When is it, what are the percentages of capacity? Is it during the day? What is it on Monday through Thursday nights? What is it on Friday, Saturday nights? And, you know, for each month, May, June, July. And it sounds like it might be cumbersome, but if that date is in there, the more they have, the more they're gonna be able to, I think, respond and predict more accurately, is this worth it? What are their potential revenues? We can always put the asterisks, the caveats in about, well, we're adding more wayfinding signage. It's still relatively new, so people are just starting to find it a little bit more and things like that. But I think that kind of hard data not only is good for an RFI, but would be good for the public and the commissioners to understand what really is happening currently in this one level, 90+ spot parking lot versus now we say we might need for 300 spots.
And are those
I would think that would help with the need.
Are the additional 200 spots going to siphon it off from the street, which we want to be
Well,
aware of?
the $68,000 is, on a $10 million parking lot, is less than 1% return. So I don't think the numbers even work without getting the parking revenue up. I can't imagine anybody investing that money for that kind of return.
There's a couple things that were, Linda Kaufman brought up at prior meetings. First of all, anybody who's in this business for a living will do their own research. That and the company that's already expressed an interest has done a lot of their own legwork to, or they wouldn't have made a presentation to us that they think it's a good opportunity for them and for the city. And I think we're limiting the discussion to the existing parking lot. There's a lot of other things that could factor into making this mobility center much more attractive to people. So I completely agree with the need to be cautious and to not leap into saying that we're going to make this huge investment. But I still think it's early in the game, and I think we're all better served if we do this, go through this process. We're not spending money, it's just our voluntary time here, and see what the possibilities are. And so I would encourage people to be a little bit more open-minded, at least in the short term, to see what these actions that we plan to take, adding new people to the task force, that kind of thing, will yield. And hey, I'd be the first one to agree. If it doesn't yield anything, then let's free up our time and let's move on to other things that might be more important. But I think in combination with a consideration of what the possibilities might be for the future with some type of a facility like that, in addition to the other things that are being recommended by the parking committee and other things that Sharon and her staff are doing to promote better traffic flow, directing people to the right parts of the city to whether they want to go to the beach. There's places that might be better than Rehoboth Avenue, that kind of thing. I think a combination of these things might actually be quite beneficial. So I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I'm not discouraged yet, and I'm not ready to say let's just stop and let's invest a little bit more time and energy and pursue this to see what it might yield.
And I would agree with that. I would agree with what you said, Commissioner Sheffer, because at the last meeting and at the prior meeting, we did have discussions around the RFI and what that would yield for us. More information with more data coming out of that from the city. And then, the folks who do this for a living, they will have questions and they will have answers, and they have seen this before. And just because, let's look at the fact that we did have a $13,500 increase from the first year to the second year. Okay, it's not great, I guess, but it does mean something. And this is an ongoing process. I don't think there's going to be a parking garage, if there is ever one, next year. So we need to have additional signage. We need to, do some more work on this. We need to look at the numbers, maybe, and through Linda Kaufman is not able to be here today, but through her work with the parking committee, we're kind of talking about some of the same things at the same time. Where people park, why they like to be close to the beach, why they don't want to walk, that's all plays into this. This is a central location. This is the only location we would have in the city. Yes, we need to keep forging ahead and talking about it, not just because we don't know. I guess, what you're saying, less than 1% yield, what's it going to be next year with additional signage, with, we don't know that. So.
And that's why we need the occupancy data, because if it is, say, 90% occupied, well, then we can't go much up. But if it's only 20%, well, then there's a whole lot of leeway in there to bring the revenue up.
I know one thing from the visitor standpoint, the first year, it's a learning curve. They didn't even know it was here, and it really wasn't clear. Didn't have time to get all of that done at one time. So I think it possibly increased because they knew it was there, and the signage was better, and I think that's going to have an impact if you do even more of that,
Yeah, and as I said, when there's an event at the convention center, we we don't limit the parking there for those folks who are attending something at the convention center, but we try to help them along. So for instance, we don't, you know, on any given day in June, if there's an event in the convention center, you know, we try to work with them. They have to pay, but maybe we block off 30 spots for them, because that's revenue, obviously, for the city, but, you know, parking lot's not used anyway. So, you know, by visitors who are not attending an event at the convention center. So there's you know, different areas we need to take a look at. Again, the fact remains that, you know, on the outskirts of the city, meaning in the south end and even parts of the north end and the permitted areas, people are not parking there. They don't want to walk. They want to be on Rehoboth Avenue, on Baltimore, on Wilmington, even Maryland. They'll pay $3 for a meter. That's certainly evident in our $3 an hour for a meter. And that's certainly evident in our numbers. Our parking revenue numbers this year, the increase in parking was close to $1 million in increased revenue. So, and I look at that as 3 different components. The weather was great. We had great weather every day. We added these additional pay stations that replaced the old IPS meters from last year. So we now have license plate recognition with the new pay stations that we added. We intend to phase them in and add more next year and possibly the following year. So that made it more efficient.
Increase the rates.
Increase the rates, and that's the third component. We certainly went from $2 an hour to $3, but not everywhere. So in the downtown area, and the consensus was that people didn't mind paying that $3 an hour as long as they could be close to where they wanted to be, which is the beach and that downtown shopping area. And still, with that, people are driving around, you know, looking for a parking spot, and they don't want to go to the extreme north or south ends and have to walk. So, you know, it's like the drive-through teller.
Yeah.
You go to the bank and, you know,
And don't get me wrong, I appreciate everything John is saying. I mean, I think they're right on. Mark's questions are spot on. I think we need to continue to bring those things forward and make sure that they're addressed. But I think that it's a bigger, I don't want to say issue, but it's a bigger potential project than just what's going on in this lot adjacent to this building. And Carol, you get feedback from the businesses, and you just had a couple very energetic meetings, I think, with some of the local businesses, and parking continues to be one of the big topics that the business owners are discussing.
But I couldn't agree more that we need more information. So when this committee said, let's not go to an RFP right away, let's get some information, I thought that was the logical next step. Let's find out what we're dealing with here. And then, you know, I'm a planner, so I like to know if we do this today, but we want this 5 years from now or more, is that all going to still fit? What are we looking into the future? So I'm all about getting more information.
And I think, I mean, again, I don't have any direct experience in parking garage construction and the business and what motivates people to do it, but I do have a lot of experience in the acquisition process at the state level and at the federal level. And a lot of what happens is that the questions that are asked would better inform us and whatever. I mean, if they ask us to get information, it'll be information that they would identify as being helpful to them. And so I think that might help us refine if we end up spending more money to have like traffic flow studies and parking studies done. I'm not opposed to that, but I think this process may help us with a better informed approach to that. And so, you know, and again, I'm a 3/4 glass full person. and I'm not ready to say no until I have to about certain things, but I do believe that we can do things in parallel. It doesn't have to be a kind of a linear thing. So as we're deciding among ourselves what we think might be best for information gathering, we may get some insights from the process that will help us do this a little bit smartly.
And there'll be recommendations from the parking committee that I think will, well, in general, it would be good for everyone here to, even if you can't attend those meetings, try to listen to some of it, because a lot of what they say is relative to what we're trying to accomplish here. Maybe not specifically toward a parking garage, but it does carry, you know, some weight and overall on what we're doing with the city and the parking. Carol, I wasn't able to attend the business meeting that the chamber held, but we did have a representative, Evan Miller, did attend that meeting. Was there any discussion about the parking garage there? Was that mentioned even?
Not really. You know, a lot of decisions were made and implemented quickly. So it was really hard to decipher out of the conditions and what people were fussing about, really, why that happened, okay? Because you know, I'm right there at 306, and I can tell you, I'm here trying to make sure that we find out if we need a parking garage, but I had empty spaces. So I hear what you're saying. I could not determine whether that was because they just were frustrated because I was getting that. I was getting the frustration from the visitors, or whether there was less people. We had good weather. So it was unusual to see empty parking spaces, period, in downtown Rehoboth in July and August. It was unusual. Because we were receiving the complaints, and it was over not being able to extend, it wasn't over the pricing, and they found it complicated, the system very complicated. It was really hard to determine why that was all happening. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you, I know why that was happening. I don't. I just know the result. I know that I've never had that many complaints come in to the visitor center. They've even walked into 306. They found me there about the parking. So the parking committee has been, you know, really looking at all of those things. I think I can share that we're doing a survey. I'm going to send it out hopefully today to the downtown members and find out whether or not they think it's a good idea to extend. And I think that's a piece of the information you need on this, because whether you do a garage or not, you're going to want to know, are you going to limit the time in the garage? What's that price going to be? Your company's going to want to know, well, what do you have?
Extend the season, extend the.
No, extend
The
the
3
time.
hour,
I want to,
3 hour.
I want to be able to,
Oh,
3 hours
extend
of
the time.
time.
Yeah, they want to
Yeah.
go 3
3
hours
hours,
and,
That was
the
90%.
That
and,
was
and
90%.
get 6 hours total.
I can't extend. That was the biggest complaint.
And I've heard the same from people.
Okay, so, you know, one of my thoughts was I was hoping that the this group and the parking committee information could be somehow combined, because I'm seeing the same thing. I think it's really important this group know what the parking committee's saying, and really important, you know.
We could certainly have a joint meeting sometime.
Yes,
You know.
so,
Well, and I've talked
What it's
to, I've
worth.
talked to Linda, and, you know, they, you know, change is hard in our city. And so I think we need to get smarter each time we kind of go through these things. And I think what I would like to see the next time that the parking committee makes their recommendations of what they would recommend could help with traffic flow and parking, is that we take more of a comprehensive look at that and try not to just select easy things. We thought that limiting the time and increasing the hourly rate would cause more of a turnover in parking. But apparently it didn't work out as planned. Now, some businesses benefited from that and were happy, but more often than not, it had the opposite effect, and we were trying. So I think there's things that we can do. I think we're already gonna add more people to this committee, and we already have absentee people today. And so I caution us in having this task force become a platoon of people. And so I think that, we need to kind of have I think, a time phase plan on how we go forward, incorporating the things that Mark and Kent and John have said, get the benefit of the insights that the Planning Commission has, continue to benefit from the data that you get from businesses and visitors. And I think if we can, kind of add a little bit more rigor to this process, we'll get to the decision point faster. And not to rush it, but I don't think any of us wants this to kind of drag on indefinitely. And we have the same thought-provoking conversations that we've had over the last couple meetings, which I enjoy, but I do think that we need to find a way to move on and get the data that's needed. Have better informed, have us all be better informed so that recommendations can come out of this. And I think the worst case is that we have a better solution for traffic flow and parking, independent of whether we do any, new construction on a parking garage. So I'm encouraged by that, if nothing else.
Agreed.
Anyone else? So I think we do have a consensus that we'll wait for the next meeting until the newly appointed and interested new members or old members from the Planning Commission are appointed to this group. And we'll set a date for the next meeting. After that occurs, we'll be in touch with everybody via email. Any comments from the citizenry?
Just one quick, Sharon, the RFI, where are we on that? I mean, do we know who we're gonna send it to? Do we have a list of possible solicitors?
No, we do not. So that's kind of a standstill until those Planning Commission members are seated. Because again, that was the recommendation and the charge, if you will, from the commissioners, that they'd like to see at least one or two additional members from of the Planning Commission. Commissioner Sheffer actually said he was in favor of that, and Commissioner Schlosser as well.
So we sort of know where that is. That's
Yeah,
sort of-
I think you have some type of format that you can use to kind of put the
Yeah,
names into. So there's a structure to create an RFI. I think one of the things, Sharon, if we could do that between now and the next meeting, is just to share that list that you and Linda and I put together of kind of the meat of what that RFI will look like. So maybe people could comment on that. I don't know
Okay.
if we've gotten that
Yeah.
out. So actually having a little bit of time will be helpful for all of you to get to look at that and ask questions and add, delete, modify. And then, and I think Linda has some ideas. She's worked in the parking garage business for a good while. And so, she knows who the primary folks are. And so I think that we have a little bit a better idea of who those potential bidders might be. It's not a huge universe of companies that do parking garages.
Well, and it's not the first time a group such as ours has gathered and talked about parking.
Right.
Carol, your many, many years of service in the chamber, I'm sure you've sat at many, many meetings. I heard anecdotally after your meeting from a few people that have been in town a while that same thing.
Yes.
30 years ago, they were
Yes.
talking about 30-minute meters. We need 30-minute meters. The businesses were slamming the commissioners. They put the 30 meters up the next year. No, they got to come down. We'll try, we'll keep trying. That's what we do,
Yeah.
right?
And change is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard.
But I think the things that we're looking at now, and I give Linda Kaufman and her committee a lot of the credit for this, is, we're looking at signage that we haven't had. And I think that's a big step. And I think that the fact that we continue to have these conversations, maybe we'll get out of that spot, that circular argument that seems to happen, and actually support the improvements that cause us to move on to talk about, Rehoboth in bloom, and boy, isn't it a great day outside, instead I couldn't find a parking spot.
I think the signage is critical, so that wayfinding that they're looking at is,
And
they've
I
got to know where to go.
give
easily.
Sharon and her team a lot of credit for that. They've worked very hard on
Yes.
this. We had a great presentation at the last commissioners meeting, and so we're all excited about the potential benefits of signage in the city, and I think there's a chance that we'll be out ahead of the county and neighboring communities. So, we may be able to influence a little bit on how they do theirs.
So I'm sticking with simplify and identify.
Yeah.
Just make it simpler and identify it. And see what we need.
And in the meantime,
See what
isn't
we
it a
need.
great city we live in?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay, if there's nothing else, anyone, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay,
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
I'm going to give you this. This was in Newcastle. So this is the way, what they did. They used an existing home. It's the same thing that you're wayfinding, instead of getting zero up here, and sometimes you need that.
See you all next time.
Yep, if not before.
If not before, probably before.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There's another one. This is what they did in residential. Smartly, how big they made it, because nobody's car is the same